feels like perspiring tonight, I advise you to go to bed, because I am sure going to. In fact, where's my handkerchief? I'm gonna wipe myself off now. Well, greetings, parents, and congratulations to Kenyon's graduating class of 2005. There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water today?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks at the other one and goes, "What the hell is water?" This is a standard requirement of U.S. commencement speeches, the deployment of didactic little parable-ish stories. The story thing turns out to be one of the better, less bullshitty conventions of the genre. But if you're worried that I plan to present myself as the wiser older fish explaining what water is to the younger fish, please don't be. I am not the wise old fish. The point of the fish story is merely that the most obvious, important realities are often the hardest ones to see and to talk about. Stated as an English sentence, of course, this is just a banal platitude. But the fact is that in the day-to-day trenches of adult existence, banal platitudes can have a life or death importance, or so I suggest to you on this dry, lovely morning. Of course, the main requirement of speeches like this is that I'm supposed to talk to you about liberal arts education's meanings, to try to explain why the degree you're about to receive has actual human value instead of just a material payoff. So let's talk about the single most pervasive cliche in the commencement speech genre, which is that a liberal arts education is not so much about filling you up with knowledge as it is about, quote, teaching you how to think. If you're like me as a student, you've never liked hearing this and tend to feel a bit insulted by the claim that you needed anybody to teach you how to think. Since the fact that you even got admitted to a college this good seems like proof that you already know how to think. But I'm going to posit to you that the liberal arts cliche turns out not to be insulting at all, because the really significant education in thinking that we're supposed to get in a place like this isn't really about the capacity to think, but rather about the choice of what to think about. If your total freedom of choice regarding what to think about seems too obvious to waste time discussing, I'd ask you to think about fish and water, and to bracket for just a few minutes your skepticism about the value of the totally obvious. Now here's another didactic little story. There's these two guys sitting together in a bar in a remote Alaskan wilderness. One of the guys is religious and the other one's an atheist. And the two are arguing about the existence of God with that special intensity that comes after the fourth beer. And the atheist says, look, it's not like I don't have actual reasons for not believing in God. It's not like I've never experimented with the whole God and prayer thing. Just last month, I got caught away from the camp in that terrible blizzard, and I was totally lost, and I couldn't see a thing, and it was 50 degrees below zero, and so I tried it. I fell to my knees in the snow, and I cried out, oh God, if there's a God, help me now. I'm lost in a blizzard, and I'm going to die if you don't help me now. And now in the bar, the religious guy looks at the atheist all puzzled. Well, then you must believe now, he says. After all, here you are alive. The atheist just rolls his eyes. Nah, man, all that was a couple of Eskimos happened to come wandering by and showed me the way back to camp. Now, not that that mystical stuff is necessarily true. The only thing that's capital T true is that you get to decide how you're going to try to see it. This, I submit, is the freedom of a real education, of learning how to be well-adjusted. You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. You get to decide what to worship. Because here's something else that's weird but true. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is actually no such thing called atheism. There is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship, be it Jesus Christ or Allah or Yahweh or the Wiccan Mother Goddess or the Four Noble Truths or some inviolable set of ethical principles, is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are what you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. You will never feel you have enough. It is the truth. Worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally grieve you. On one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myths, proverbs, cliches, epigrams, parables, the skeleton of every great story. The whole trick is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. Worship power. You will end up feeling weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to numb you to your own fear. Worship your intellect. Being seen as smart, you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. But the insidious thing about these forms of worship is that they're not evil or sinful. It is that they're unconscious. They are default settings. They are being in water without knowing it. They're the kind of worship you just gradually slide into day after day, getting more and more selective about what you see and how you measure value without ever being fully aware that that is what you're doing. And the so-called real world will not discourage you from operating on your default settings, because the so-called real world of men and money and power hums merrily along in a pool of fear and anger and frustration and craving and worship of self. Our own present culture has harnessed these forces in a way that have yielded extraordinary wealth and comfort and personal freedom. The freedom to be lords of our tiny, skull-sized kingdoms, all alone at the center of creation. This kind of freedom does have much to recommend it. But of course, there are all different kinds of freedom, and the kind that is most precious you will not hear much talk about in the great outside world of wanting and achieving and displaying. The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline and being able to care about other people and to sacrifice for them over and over in myriad, petty, unsexy ways every day. That is real freedom. That is being educated and understanding how to think. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. I know that this stuff probably doesn't sound fun and breezy and grandly inspirational the way a commencement speech is supposed to sound. What it is, as far as I can see, is the capital T truth, with a whole lot of rhetorical niceties stripped away. You are, of course, free to think of whatever you wish, but please don't dismiss it as just some finger-wagging Dr. Laura sermon. None of this stuff is really about morality or religion or dogma or big fancy questions of life after death. The capital T truth is about life before death. It's about the real value of a real education, which has almost nothing to do with knowledge and everything to do with simple awareness. Awareness of what is real and essential, so hidden in plain sight all around us, all the time, that we have to keep reminding ourselves over and over, this is water. This is water. It is unimaginably hard to do this, to stay conscious and alive in the adult world day in and day out, which means yet another grand cliche turns out to be true. Your education really is the job of a lifetime, and it commences now. I wish you way more than life.